They didn't leave because you weren't good enough. They left because you hadn't awakened yet. That version of you they walked away from? That wasn't your final form. That was the trial run, the soft launch, the beta version of a man still learning how to stand on his own 2 feet. You were still plugged into the matrix. Reactive, approval-seeking, overly accommodating. The guy who texted back in seconds, who over-explained himself, who said it's okay, even when it wasn't, who made excuses for their behavior while ignoring your own intuition, screaming, "This isn't it." But they were fine with that version of you. Why? Because they could control it. The truth no one likes to say out loud is this: an avoidant doesn't fear you loving them. They fear you loving yourself more. They don't panic when you cry, when you ask for closure, when you spiral. They panic when you get quiet, when you start building instead of begging, when you stop needing them and start meeting yourself. Let's not sugarcoat it. They were okay with the you that needed them. They were okay with the you that apologized for having needs. They were okay with the you that checked their story views at midnight and interpreted silence as hope. But the second you stop chasing, the moment you stop performing for their attention, the instant you stop making their inconsistency a puzzle you're supposed to solve, that's when everything shifts. Because here's the ugly truth that most people won't admit. Most avoidant exes don't actually want you to heal. They don't want you to find yourself. They don't want you to evolve, grow, or glow. They want you to wait, to pause your progress, to keep your heart parked on the side of the emotional highway while they figure themselves out. They want you stuck. Why? Because when you stay stuck, they stay superior. See, when you were insecure and anxious and overly available, they had leverage. They knew how you'd react. They knew you'd forgive them. They knew you'd wait. But now your energy has changed. Now you're not chasing them, you're chasing purpose. Now you're harder to read, harder to reach, harder to control. And that freaks them out. You didn't need a new outfit. You didn't need a new car or more likes on Instagram. You just needed to shift your center of gravity. You stopped orbiting around them. You started revolving around you. And that one change, that's the change that breaks their internal algorithm. Because now they don't know how to reach you. You're not responding to the old triggers. You're not picking up the old breadcrumbs. You're not acting from the same wounds. You're not even the same person anymore. You went from emotionally dependent to emotionally dangerous. Not dangerous in a toxic way, but in a magnetic way. In a this man doesn't fold anymore kind of way. You became something they can't control. And what people can't control, they try to minimize or stalk or test. So now they're watching your stories. Now they're accidentally liking your posts. Now they're sending half-hearted check-in texts like, "Hey, just wanted to see how you've been." As if they didn't ghost you when you were most vulnerable. But here's the thing. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about playing games. This is about awakening. You're not here to prove anything to them. You're here to remember who you are. Because the version of you they left behind was real. But it wasn't whole. It was rooted in fear. Fear of loss. Fear of abandonment. Fear that if you weren't needed, you weren't lovable. But that fear, that's gone now. You don't chase people who avoid you. You don't seek closure from people who cause the confusion. You don't break yourself trying to fix someone else's chaos. You rise. You evolve. You reclaim your energy. and redirect it into your own becoming. Because the one change they never expected, you finally started choosing yourself. And when that happens, your absence becomes louder than any text. Your silence becomes more powerful than any argument. Your growth becomes their reminder that they don't get access to you anymore. They didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because you were still becoming. And now that you've awakened, they don't know what to do with you anymore. So here's my promise to you. Watch this video until the end, because what I'm about to share will not only help you understand exactly why they acted the way they did, but it will show you how to take your power back in a way they never saw coming. If you're ready to step into the next version of yourself, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who's still stuck in that cycle, and join our channel membership to help us keep creating no BS content that helps you level up. Type this in the comments as your declaration. I choose growth over games. Say it to anchor yourself. Say it to declare your new standard. Say it because you're done shrinking. This is your moment. Let's go deeper. Let's rebuild your edge. Let's get into it. Stay focused. Key point 1. They were never scared of losing you. They were scared of you waking up. Let's get one thing straight right now. They didn't fear losing you. They feared losing control over you. See, avoidant people operate in emotional shadows. They thrive when you're unsure, overthinking, chasing, second-guessing yourself. It gives them the upper hand, because as long as you're focused on them, they don't have to focus on themselves. They don't actually want deep intimacy. They just want access to your validation on their terms. And the insecure version of you? That version was easy to manage. You always texted back. You always forgave. You always stayed available, no matter how inconsistent, vague, cold or hurtful they were. And for a while they depended on that dynamic. Your pain was their safety net. Your predictability was their power. Your inability to detach, that was their comfort zone. Because let's be honest, when you're constantly trying to win them back, you're not focused on winning yourself back. And that's what they counted on. They didn't fear you walking away. They feared you realizing that you could. Because when that happens, everything changes. You stop reacting. You stop checking your phone. You stop answering low-effort messages at 2 a.m. You stop bleeding emotionally for someone who only shows up when they're bored or lonely. They wanted a version of you that stayed addicted to hope. But hope is a hell of a drug when it blinds you from reality. And here's the part that stings. They only respected your worth after you stopped offering it for free. They didn't respond to kindness. They didn't respond to effort. They didn't respond to emotional honesty. But the second you went quiet, the second you got back in the gym, started building, stopped reaching out, they started lurking. And suddenly, they're thinking about you. Suddenly, they miss your energy. Suddenly, they want to catch up. No. What they miss is control. What they're scared of is the version of you who no longer puts them on a pedestal. Because you woke up. And once you wake up, you stop negotiating with confusion. You stop mislabeling pain as passion. You stop confusing their mixed signals for meaning. They wanted your devotion, but not your depth. They wanted your attention, but not your ascension. Now, you've disrupted that dynamic. You've stopped seeking comfort and started demanding clarity. You've stopped settling for crumbs and started creating standards. And most of all, you've stopped needing their approval to feel whole. And that, more than anything, is what makes you powerful. Key point 2. You were the mirror they couldn't handle. Let's go deeper, because this isn't just about a breakup. This is about the psychology behind why your avoidant ex kept pulling away, even when you were showing up, being consistent, loyal, loving. You weren't the problem, they just couldn't handle what you reflected back at them. See, people with avoidant tendencies aren't running from you, they're running from the parts of themselves they don't want to see. You showed them that closeness was possible. You showed them that love could be stable. You showed them that vulnerability wasn't weakness. But to someone who's been emotionally unavailable their whole life, that kind of clarity is terrifying. Because when you offer real intimacy to a person who's emotionally disconnected from themselves, they don't say thank you. They say, I need space. Why? Because now they feel exposed. Your presence became a mirror, a reflection of all the inner work they refused to do, and when people aren't ready to face their own emotional immaturity, they'll convince themselves you're too intense, too much, too needy. But let's be real here. You weren't too much. They were just too small to hold what you brought to the table. You were honest. They avoided. You were committed. They ran. You leaned in. They pushed back. Because the closer you got to them, the more they had to confront their inability to receive healthy love. And that's what avoidant people can't stand. Emotional accountability, because that would require them to say, I'm not ready. I don't know how to love properly. I self-sabotage because I don't believe I'm worthy. But accountability doesn't fuel avoidance. Projection does. So they made it about you, your flaws, your mistakes, your imperfections. And you started to believe them. You started thinking you were the problem. But no. You were the mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They just reflect. And what they saw in your love was too honest, too confronting, too raw. So instead of stepping up, they bailed. Because that's easier than growing. That's easier than healing. That's easier than admitting the truth. You triggered the parts of them they were too scared to heal. So don't beat yourself up for being emotionally available. That wasn't your weakness. That was your gift. You just gave it to someone too emotionally bankrupt to receive it. And here's the twist. Now that you've stopped offering that emotional mirror, they miss it. They miss the validation. They miss the empathy. They miss the version of themselves they felt like around you, but didn't have the courage to become. So if they come back, it's not because they suddenly matured. It's because they want that mirror back. They want the feeling, but not the responsibility that comes with it. And now that you know that, you don't fall for crumbs anymore. You don't hand out emotional intimacy to people who ghost when it gets too real. You've reclaimed your power by breaking the mirror they couldn't face. You no longer reflect them. You reflect your highest self. Key point 3. Their power was built on your confusion. Let's talk about the game they were really playing. Avoidant exes don't always walk away clean. They don't ghost and disappear forever. Nah, that would actually be easier to heal from. What they do is far more manipulative. They hover. They breadcrumb. They send vague, I miss you texts without taking accountability. They lurk on your socials. They toss out just enough attention to keep you emotionally hooked, but never enough to create real progress. And here's the sickest part of it. They knew exactly what they were doing. They fed off your confusion because your confusion kept you available. While you were stuck over-analyzing mixed signals, trying to decode emojis, wondering if their silence meant space or goodbye, they were at peace. Because as long as you stayed confused, you stayed emotionally invested. Your overthinking was their comfort. Your hesitation was their leash. Your self-doubt was their power source. You kept thinking, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe if I just give them time, maybe they'll come around. But maybe isn't a love language. That wasn't closure. That was control. And while you were spiraling, they were stable. Not emotionally stable, ego stable. Because let's face it, the avoidant isn't always a villain in the classic sense. They don't need to yell or insult or ghost. They just need to keep you uncertain. Uncertainty is the currency of emotional manipulators. Because when you're stuck waiting for clarity, you don't focus on yourself. You don't grow. You don't detach. You don't set standards. You stay on their timeline, their emotional leash, their stage, playing the role they assigned you. But here's the moment everything breaks. When you stop playing, when you stop replying, when you stop wondering, when you stop making excuses for their inconsistency and start holding yourself to a new standard, suddenly the power flips. Because the second you clarify your standards, you break their entire playbook. You go from option to unreachable. And the best part? You no longer care about winning them back because you realize the game was rigged from the start. And let's make something crystal clear. Confusion is not chemistry. Distance is not desire. And silence is not love. Their power was never real. It only existed because you kept questioning your own. But not anymore. Now you know what they were doing. Now you see the game. Now you're the one who's gone, and this time for real. Key point 4. The shift that broke their illusion. You want to know the exact moment everything flipped. It wasn't when you posted a thirst trap. It wasn't when you went no contact. It wasn't even when you blocked them. The moment that broke their illusion, the moment that rattled their ego, was when you stopped caring if they noticed. That's when you stopped performing, stopped waiting, stopped calculating your every move, hoping they'd wake up. You didn't send a warning. You didn't post a cryptic quote. You just evolved, silently, deliberately, unapologetically. You started working out, not to get revenge, but to rebuild your identity. You started reading, not to impress them, but to outgrow your old patterns. You started surrounding yourself with people who see you now, not who remember the version of you they could manipulate. And that subtle, powerful shift, that's what cracked their illusion. Because for the first time, your energy wasn't orbiting around them. It was invested in you. And they felt it. Avoidant exes always feel it. When their emotional supply cuts off, they feel it in their gut when you don't flinch at their check-ins. When your name is no longer waiting in their notifications. When your spirit no longer anxiously vibrates in their orbit. They expected you to stay on standby, but instead you stood up. And the version of you they abandoned, that version was gone. In its place, a focused, grounded, purpose-driven version. The kind of person they can't predict, can't control, can't breadcrumb. Because now you have boundaries, you have vision, you have momentum. And what scares avoidance the most is when the person they dismissed no longer needs validation to feel valuable. You don't chase, you attract. You don't react. You respond with silence. You don't seek closure. You become your own. And here's the most magnetic thing about all of this. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You're too busy choosing yourself. So I want you to type this in the comments right now. This is the secret mantra that flips the script forever. I wasn't abandoned. I outgrew the illusion. Let that sink in. You weren't rejected. You were released. Because the version of them that left, that version can't meet the version of you that's emerging. You've evolved beyond their level of connection, and now they're scrambling to figure out what changed. Here's the truth. They don't miss you. They miss having access to a version of you that no longer exists, and they'll never get it back. Key point 5. When you become whole, they lose their leverage. Here's a hard truth most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. Avoidant exes are attracted to imbalance. They thrive when you need more than they're willing to give. Why? Because as long as you're overextending, they never have to. They loved the version of you that questioned yourself, the version that gave too much, that apologized first, that tolerated breadcrumbs and called it hope, that settled for almost and romanticized their confusion as complexity. But the moment you became emotionally self-sufficient, the power they had over you died. That's the piece they never expected. See, the avoidant wants to feel desired without the responsibility of reciprocating. But when you're whole, when your value no longer depends on their response, affection, or attention, they lose all leverage. Because suddenly, they can't push your buttons anymore. You're no longer emotionally reactive to their half-assed attempts. Their hot and cold game doesn't faze you. The silence, you use it for growth. The breadcrumbs, you brush them off with peace. Because here's what being whole means. You no longer make room for inconsistent people in your consistent life. You no longer overgive in hopes they'll finally see your worth. You already know your worth, and that makes you unshakable. When you become emotionally whole, your presence starts demanding more than they can offer. It intimidates the avoidant, because now they'd have to show up fully, not halfway, not only when convenient, not only when lonely, and most of them can't. Because emotional consistency terrifies people who are used to emotional chaos. So they start pulling back. Or worse, they come back and try to replay the old game. They'll say, you've changed, that things feel different, that they don't know where you went. Here's the reality. You didn't disappear. You leveled up. You're no longer the version of you they knew how to control. You're the version of you they don't know how to approach anymore. And that's when you realize they didn't want you healed. They wanted you dependent. Because your healing takes away their safety net. It means they no longer have the upper hand. And what does that do? It triggers their insecurity. Because if they can't control you, they can't delay facing themselves. That's the game. They used your wounds as leverage. But now, you've turned your wounds into wisdom. And wisdom doesn't chase. It attracts. Wisdom doesn't settle. It selects. And wisdom doesn't need closure. It becomes the final chapter. Key point 6. Detachment is the death of their ego. Let's be brutally honest. Your avoidant ex didn't expect you to detach. They expected you to wait, to simmer, to spiral, to keep the door open, just in case they ever wanted to walk back through it. Because for people like them, your availability was never about love. It was about control. They weren't comforted by your connection. They were comforted by your attachment. And the second you started pulling your energy back, the second you stopped hoping they'd come back, The second you stopped posting those "look how great I'm doing without you" stories and actually started doing great without them, that's when their ego cracked. Your detachment didn't just threaten their comfort, it killed their control. Because when you detach, but real, grounded, sovereign detachment, they feel it in their bones. Suddenly, the things that used to get your attention don't even register. Their cryptic texts, left unread. Their likes on your posts, ignored. Their name, just a name. No longer an anchor, no longer a trigger, no longer your entire story. And to someone who was used to being the center of your emotional universe, that's terrifying. They didn't expect you to heal. They expected you to hold on, to quietly mourn, to prove your loyalty through suffering, to build your life around their absence. But here's the twist. You turned your pain into peace. You didn't just move on, you leveled up. You got serious about your purpose. You started mastering your emotions instead of outsourcing your worth. You stopped defining yourself through the lens of their approval. You became dangerous. Not dangerous in a toxic way, but dangerous in a magnetic way. The kind of person who doesn't settle, who doesn't seek validation, who doesn't need someone to pick them because they've already chosen themselves. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, that's the worst case scenario, because the game doesn't work when you don't bite the bait, when you don't react, when you stop playing altogether. See, detachment isn't indifference. It's not, "I don't care what happens." It's, "I care so much about myself that I won't compromise my peace again." And when you radiate that energy, you stop attracting people who want to control you and start attracting people who want to grow with you. Because here's the truth. Avoidant people only thrive in relationships where your self-worth is negotiable. But your new standard? It's non-negotiable. You're not interested in making them feel safe at the expense of your soul. You're not available for half love, half effort, half presence. You've gone full in on yourself now. And that's the shift they never saw coming. They underestimated your power when you were healing. Now, they have to watch you shine from the sidelines. Key point 7. You're not trying to win them back. You've already won. Let's make one thing clear. You're not in a comeback arc. You're in a rebirth. There's nothing to get back. No need to prove you're better now. No plot twist where they return and you finally feel enough. Because you've already won, the second you stop needing them to validate your worth. That's what they'll never understand. See, they were comfortable being the one with the upper hand. The one who could withhold love. The one who decided when to connect and when to disappear. The one who always had you on the hook, second-guessing your value. But now, there is no hook, no game, no fantasy. Just you, clear, solid, untouchable. And when they look at you now, they're not just seeing someone better. They're seeing someone they can't reach anymore. Because this new version of you, you don't even speak the same emotional language as before. You're fluent in boundaries, in self-respect, in peace. And that scares them more than any angry text or cold shoulder ever could. Because people like your avoidant ex expect revenge. They expect drama. They expect a scene. But healing, peace, indifference, that's the scariest thing you can serve them. Because that's when they realize you were never the problem. You were just the mirror. And now that you've shattered the illusion they projected onto you, they're stuck facing themselves. That's your final win. Not getting them back. Not proving anything. not rubbing your success in their face. The real win is this: you no longer need them. You no longer want them. You no longer recognize the person who begged for crumbs. Because that person is gone. In their place is someone powerful, someone centered, someone who doesn't just survive heartbreak, they alchemize it. And if they ever come back, they won't be met with desperation. They'll be met with stillness. A quiet, confident knowing that they no longer have access to the version of you they once took for granted. And that's the closure. They thought you'd stay broken. You became bulletproof. Here's what you need to remember. They didn't expect you to rise. They expected you to rot, to sit in the ruins of the version of yourself they left behind. But now, you've built something they can't access. A version of yourself that isn't reacting, but radiating. A version of yourself that doesn't need closure, because you are the closure. And now that you've seen who you can become when you stop chasing, there's no going back. You're not just healed, you're reborn, because your avoidant ex never feared losing you. They feared you'd wake up. And now that you have, they're realizing you're not just different, you're unreachable. So if you've made it this far, I want you to drop this in the comments right now. I wasn't abandoned. I outgrew the illusion. Let it be your war cry, your boundary, your proof that you're not who you used to be. And if you're ready to take this to the next level, our next video dives deep into the psychology that makes avoidant exes spiral without a single word from you. Top 5 things that destroy an avoidant ex's ego without you saying a word. You do not want to miss that one. Trust me. So, here's what to do right now. Like this video if it hit you in the chest. Subscribe if you're done chasing and ready to start choosing yourself. Share this with someone who's still healing in silence. They need to hear this truth. Join our channel membership if you want exclusive content and weekly healing missions designed to help you fully reclaim your power. And above all, never forget our mantra here. Your peace is your power. Say it, type it, live it. Because the old you, they were easy to ghost. But this version of you, this version is unforgettable.